right? Just finished watching the 10th Democratic primary debate, and it was not good. It was even worse than the last one. The first hour was a complete mess. Where were the moderators? At one point, Elizabeth Warren interrupts. It's not her turn. She just talks over everybody, and she goes on and on and on and on. And then the rest of the candidates are like, oh, okay, this is how it works. We just interrupt and we just keep going on and on and on. Moderators completely lost control. It was Lord of Flies. It was a complete mess. The second half, the last hour, things settled down. It got a little better. Joe Biden actually had a good line on this because he's more respectful, and he was getting really frustrated. And he said, well, with my Catholic upbringing, I follow the rules more than some of these other people on the stage. But at some points, he's like, well, I'm just going to keep going because everybody else did on some of his answers. So not a good night for the moderators. Let's begin with Mayor Bloomberg. Not as bad as the previous night, which isn't surprising because I don't think he could do worse than the last debate. Elizabeth Warren, and maybe because now Elizabeth Warren isn't right next to him, you got Buttigieg, so he's got some space there. Elizabeth Warren did attack him, not as effective as the last debate. But the last debate, she had that real great line. We are competing against a billionaire who's referred to women as fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. So that was something that was repeated over and over and over again. I don't think she captured that moment this time around. She still had some attacks, and Bloomberg really, once again, didn't defend himself. At one point saying, well, I had 3 women do non-disclosure agreements. I've done everything you asked, like he's somehow her servant. It's like, gee whiz, man, this is a competition. Go after her on her record. Go after her on some of the lies that she said. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to attack Elizabeth Warren on some of her things. Where Mayor Bloomberg was the strongest was on education. So how he put it, and I haven't seen the fact checks on this, when he became mayor, none of the top 25 large city schools were in New York. He began charter schools. And when he left, there was like 23 of the top 25 schools in New York. So he talked about how charter schools really improved education. Now they keep talking about the African American vote, the black vote, which is really big in South Carolina. Studies have shown that charter schools are really important. This is something that's wanted by the African American community, because when you look at parents, especially single mothers, single black mothers, they want school choice. They want to send they want to have good education for their kids. And if their only choice is a failing public school, then that's basically a recipe for failure. But if they have the competition with these charter schools where they have an opportunity to get better education for their kids, that's what they want. Now, Elizabeth Warren wants all that public dollars just going into public schools. She's against charter schools. She just wants to give more and more money to the corrupt teachers unions. And I can say that. I went to a public high school in Chicago. The education was terrible. The teachers union is corrupt. Chicago's put a tremendous amount of money in schools. A whole lot of it has been wasted on corruption, mismanagement, incompetence. So just throwing money at public schools in major cities, thinking that's going to improve education, it's not. Now, it will get you the votes of the teachers unions, which is what she's more after, not really about increasing education for kids. You want increased education for kids, studies have shown charter schools are the way to do it. Not that every charter school has been successful, but when you look at the overall statistics, it's definitely a degree in success. And apparently with Bloomberg during his time in New York, that was something they did that really improved education. Pete Buttigieg, I mean, he's a good speaker. He was smooth. You know, he doesn't stutter. He's not like Joe Biden, but I don't think he really stood out I think he was kind of invisible with the others on the stage. Elizabeth Warren, I think, really didn't get attacked that much. People that really didn't go after her, and that might be because people just see her falling in the polls and figure, why even bother? Maybe not worth the effort. Okay, going to Bernie Sanders. Now, notice this time we have 7 people on the stage, so we have somebody in the middle. Bernie Sanders is the middle man. He is the front runner. There you have it. And of course, as the front runner, where we got South Carolina on Saturday, we got Super Tuesday coming up right after that, a week from now. So he received the most attacks. I think overall he defended himself really well as far as his spending plan, which is like $50 trillion over 10 years. He just pointed to a Medicare study that recently came out showing that Medicare for all would actually cut overall cost of medical care. When he's attacked as saying, oh my gosh, if we have him as the primary and he wins the primary, we're going to lose to Trump and we're going to lose all this stuff. He pointed to polls showing him beating Trump. So overall, I think he was able to do pretty well with the attacks. One of the interesting things, he is asked about Israel, and he referred to Netanyahu as a reactionary racist. I found it very surprising that he would use that kind of language for the current leader of Israel. And of course, right after that, he talks about how we have to bring everybody together. Okay, we have to bring everybody together. And you just referred to Netanyahu as a reactionary racist. That was surprising. Joe Biden, really angry. He just looks so angry. I mean, he was talking about China and slamming China, and I'm going to go up to that leader and I'm going to make him do this and make him do that, and he's a dictator. And he came across like a dictator. I'm going to go over there, I'm going to make him do these things. So, not a best night. And something funny he said, he had a pretty major gaffe. Since 2007, he said 150 million people have died from gun violence. 150 million people. That's almost half the population. That would be like if every other person has been shot and killed since 2007. Now, we have way too much gun violence. The numbers, especially when you look at major cities like Chicago, I'm in the St. Louis area, major cities, gun violence is a big problem. The numbers aren't good, but it's not 150 million people since 2007. If that was the case, our population would be almost half of what it is now. So nobody challenged him on that either. He said 150 million people, and nobody said what. So that was interesting. Amy Klobuchar, not a real standout night. I think she's fading away. When she was given her closing argument, so everybody was given what's a misconception about you and what's your favorite motto. So she said, the misconception is that I'm boring, and I'm not boring. I mean, pretty lame, because if you have to say you're not boring, that kind of means you are boring. And then for her motto, she said something about politics is about improving lives, and then went on and on and on about her uncle, her mother, her father, just on and on. It's like, gee whiz, it's been 2 hours. We're out of time. We want to just kind of go down the line. And finally, it's like, okay, Amy, let's go on to the next person. It's like, gee whiz. And it was pretty boring. Okay, Tom Steyer, the guy who has to shake his head up and down when he talks. Joe Biden attacked him on, he says he's a champion for the black and brown people. And I got to say, I'm so annoyed when I hear that term over and over again. Black and brown people, black and brown people. It seems like the Democrats, they're just so obsessed with this race baiting and separating people by race. They view the United States from a past tense and want to talk about the historic racism rather than viewing the United States as a nation of progress, which it is. Uh, absolutely. So Biden attacked him claiming to be a champion for the black and brown people because he owned private prisons. To which Tom Steyer replies, "Well, when I found out bad things were happening, I sold my private prisons, and then in the state I was in, I worked to get private prisons removed." Okay, so after you made your money from private prisons, after you sold, then you made it so in your certain area that they were kicked out, if that's even true. This is kind of like the billions he made in the coal industry. After he cashed a check and made all that money, oh, you know what? Now I'm going to be anti coal. And he talked about reparations for the 400 years of slavery. It's like he just wants to keep going, looking to the past, the racism of the past, rather than focusing on all the incredible progress we've made in race relations over the last 50 years. I'm not interested in a candidate who views the United States as a bad country and racist country. I want a candidate who loves this country and views this country as a nation of progress, because that's what we are. The United States has never been less racist than it is right now. I'm in my 50s. I wasn't born during segregation, and I'm in my 50s. So the years are passing by, and these people want to pretend like it's still 1963. It's not. Now, this gets to something that Buttigieg said about Trump. So Trump's ideal America is the 1950s. I think he's right. When Donald Trump says make America great again, I believe he's talking about the 1950s. So what was America like? Well, we defeated the Nazis, so we were proud as hell defeating this horrible evil in the world. We were supplying a lot of aid to war-torn countries, blankets and food for an upcoming winter, saving lives. Our factories were running full steam. The women were told, okay, now stay home, have children, men get married. So much opportunity for men because our factories weren't destroyed in the war. So we're producing so much opportunity, especially for a young man. A lot of your competition died during the war, along with having this opportunity. So this mother stays at home with the kids, strong families, whole lot of economic opportunity. So yes, I believe this is what Donald Trump looks at is make America great again, like the 1950s. Now you don't have that same set of circumstances. You're never going to be able to go back to that specific set of circumstances that we had. And he compared Sanders to someone who idolized the United States from the 1960s. Maybe that's so. So let's look at some of the other issues. I get a little nervous when I look at my notes because half the time I can't read them. So yeah, Steyer says he's the only candidate for slavery reparations, just something that just increases this racial divide, this focus on the past, this just focus on racial division, when every American, every United States of American, doesn't matter what your background is, you want safe neighborhoods, you want economic opportunity, you want good schools. And let's just talk about what all Americans want. Stop talking about, oh, well, we got to walk on eggshells about these issues and talk about these certain issues. If we're speaking to a Hispanic group, if we're speaking to an African American group, if we're speaking to, what have it, start talking to all Americans and start talking about what all Americans want. When it comes to equality, charter schools in inner cities, that would be huge. They also talked about legalizing marijuana. If you want to look at the prison system and the fact that that's dominated minorities is compared to whites, making marijuana legal and getting the people out of prison for marijuana and getting that off of their record, that would be huge. And also, we know Trump signed some prison reform, and there should be more prison reform as well. I think we should all agree that violent criminals, we shouldn't be lenient on violent criminals, but certainly marijuana. When you hear stories about a man put in prison for 10 years for marijuana who then can't support his family, I mean, that is absolutely insane. And some of these other crazy sentences people have had for non-violent crimes. So I think we can all talk about how legalizing marijuana and definitely prison reform can get a lot of people, non-violent offenses, get them out of prison, because the amount of people we incarcerate is pretty crazy. So overall, I think Bernie Sanders held his own. I think he still is the front runner. I think he's still going to be projected to win this thing for the Democrats. But overall, on a 10th debate, I don't know if people are still watching. And I think overall, Trump still came out pretty good after this debate, like the last one. They did attack Trump on cutting funding for the CDC, Center of Disease Control, now that we have this horrible coronavirus outbreak. So that was some valid criticism, but mostly it was flinging mud at each other, attacking each other, which, makes all of them look bad, and it makes Trump look better. But this is it. This is the last debate. We're going to have South Carolina. We're going to have Super Tuesday, including Texas and California. I think after Super Tuesday, it's going to be pretty clear on who the front runner is. And we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. This is Jim Wall. Until next time.
Cisco, do we have to leave all our good friends now?
Only until next time, Pancho. Adios, amigos.